Democratic primary now has multiple billionaire candidates, and there are a couple of groups and people who are not happy with this. One is the vast majority of voters who have no interest in them whatsoever. The other, Bernie Sanders, who tweeted this: if you had a couple $1 billion, you could announce your candidacy for president and be taken seriously, even if you were the dumbest person on earth. Billionaires should not be able to buy our elections, and we're going to change that. And so look, obviously on the policy implications there, couldn't agree more. And Emma, we've talked, I think we might have talked about STEYER the last time you were on. It is really frustrating. Even STEYER was good on some of the issues, good on climate change or whatever. The fact that they can just say, yeah, I'm gonna spend, like STEYER's, I think he's spent like 40% of all the ad money for all the candidates was him. Bloomberg says he could spend $1 billion in this primary.
And he's already spent tens of millions, and someone tweeted that that would be the equivalent of $39 for an average person. So he's just like, it's like he bought a sweater at J. Crew.
Yeah.
Like that's what it is for him, just spending money on this. And like, what is gross about this though, is you know what Bloomberg could do with that $39 equivalent of money, or STEYER, or all of these billionaires or really rich people? Donate it down ballot and actually make a difference in these races and turn seats blue. Whereas we have candidates on the Democratic side scrounging and scrapping for money, where these billionaires were just going on ego trips and running for president. Although I think STEYER's authentically trying to run for president.
Yes.
What I think Bloomberg is doing is this is a threat to the Democratic voters and the Democratic establishment and apparatus. If you nominate Sanders or Warren, I'm gonna run as an independent, and right now I'm putting the infrastructure in place and laying that groundwork to do so, and run as a spoiler. I think that could be actually the legitimate purpose of his candidacy right now.
I honestly, I respond much in the same way that, like on the other side, when they're like Gabbard's definitely gonna run as a third party candidate, I'm like, I don't fear a third party candidate right now, considering the stakes. And I know that the stakes normally make you fear it more, but I don't. Mike Bloomberg as a third party candidate, I don't think a ton of Americans are gonna be like, I could support him and maybe get 4 more years of the guy I hate more than I've ever hated a politician. Sure, I'll support Mike Bloomberg. I just don't see it happening. Yeah, maybe he'll take 1% or something. Gary Johnson took 4%. Like there's always gonna be the third party candidates that get a couple percentage points. I'm really not that worried at this point. Maybe he will. I'm more worried about the effect he'll have in the primary, I guess, because he will be spending a ton of money. And I can tell you one way he's already having an effect. Bloomberg is targeting more than 840 search terms that specifically reference climate, with hundreds more that reference climate adjacent terms. So this is basically Google ads. When you search for things that have to do with climate change, and when I say have to do with, it's a broad definition, hundreds of things you could type, his ads will come up. Not one of the candidates who are really strong on dealing with the climate crisis, that support a Green New Deal, things like that. Instead, you're gonna see campaign literature having to do with Mike Bloomberg. And as you pointed out, that's like a buck out of his pocket. He doesn't care, he could buy that up and it doesn't matter to him at all. And so he could easily crowd out the online ad space across everything if he wanted to. And that's the only person you'd learn about. That would be pretty, I think, effective in helping to shift this primary.
Yeah, I mean, this is the natural progression of having a campaign finance system that is run privately, right? So you have corporations and very rich people having an insane amount of influence on our electoral politics. And you have people with charisma like Mike Bloomberg, not traditional, not politicians who would succeed in any other institutionalized framework, able to actually make a legit run at this just purely because of the money they have in their pocket.
Yeah, and even like I agree with you that like I basically put it STEYER, Bloomberg, Schultz in terms of billionaire power rankings, in terms of like how serious they are and how not purely driven by liquefied evil. Tom STEYER actually seems to think like, hey, I have the right, like I have the right positions on some important issues, so I want to run. But even Tom STEYER, like he's there because he had the money. He just qualified, by the way, for the December debate. He had to get 200,000 donors, and we've talked previously about the way he does that. It's basically a con. It's like you donate this money and you get the money back. Like he's basically buying donations to qualify for the debate, and that is definitely not supposed to be how it works. It's supposed to be a measure of organic support for your candidacy across a huge number of people across a number of different states. And a billionaire can show that, no, we don't have to do that. I can just set up this website that like people donate, then they get the money back. It doesn't count for anything, but it qualifies technically.
And can you just imagine for a second how personally frustrating it must be if you are someone who literally scratched and clawed like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, who was a law professor and then authentically made a run, or like even the candidate that I don't think is like that good, Cory Booker, right? Like legit candidates who really came up through the political process and kind of paid their dues. To see someone like STEYER, like, no, I'm just gonna make a run at this. Like STEYER maybe outpolling someone like Booker. How infuriating that must be for people like that. I don't know. It's just a thought, but I mean. The reason I kind of push back and I do think that him running as an independent would be very scary is because he does have political experience and credibility on that issue, even though I do think much of his tenure as mayor of New York was disastrous, racist policing, gentrification, all of those things.
Yeah,
ton of that.
You could be right.
But populism in this era, if Bernie Sanders is the nominee, we would really have to go all in behind him because there are older voters, and we're seeing this with the Biden coalition, the people who aren't going away, that are scared of that brand of populism. And I think if Bloomberg ran, those voters would go to him, and that's not an insignificant chunk. So I just want us to all be clear-eyed about this because we need a progressive agenda, but the establishment is very strong in its opposition, and that could be some way that it manifests itself.
Yeah, well, theoretically, they should also be just as strong in opposition to an independent run by Mike Bloomberg if that throws the election of the Republicans. And so,
but they would rather have a Republican than Bernie. I think a lot of the establishment. They would rather have.
I've never really agreed with that. I understand that they think Bernie's wrong, but they also would probably think, you know what, we could probably control him. I bet it's easier. Like with Donald Trump, they get nothing for 4 years. Yes, maybe they get tax cuts, the benefits, or whatever. Anyway, that's a longer conversation. I've never really agreed with that. But anyway, you have swayed me to some extent on the Bloomberg thing. So here's what needs to happen. We had early on, hey, Bernie Sanders, you better not run as a third party candidate. If you're gonna be in these debates, you're running as a Democrat and that's it. More recently, Tulsi Gabbard, all of these talks on MSNBC and everything, is she just gonna run as a third party candidate? Okay, well, here's Bloomberg. You make a very good case. Maybe he is just setting up a third party run. I want, let's see, I want Chuck Todd talking about it. I want, who's the, I never remember his name. Jake Tapper, next time you have him on, ask him, are you gonna be running? You need to be clear, are you gonna be running? Remember, they're all supposed to be signing a pledge saying that if they're gonna be in these debates, that's the only run they're gonna make. I wanna see his signature on that pledge. I want the DNC officials grilling him about that. You need to take it just as seriously as you do with Bernie and with Tulsi Gabbard, if that's actually a fear that you have.
Yeah, I agree, but the fear is not, a third party run that would spoil someone like Pete Buttigieg, right? The fear, wait, it's the other way around. The fear is not a third party run that would spoil someone like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, although to an extent I think they'd be happier with Warren. The fear is a third party run that would have spoiled someone like Hillary Clinton. That's really where they're actually freaked out about it.
Exactly. Well, look, I would appeal to their, we only have 30 seconds. Okay, so if you're a DNC official, someone in the Democratic establishment that thinks, hey, maybe we just get 4 more years of Trump and we can last, I will say to you what I said to the people that thought the first 4 years of Donald Trump would be totally acceptable. How would you like a 7-2 Republican-dominated Supreme Court for literally the rest of your life? If you're in the Democratic establishment, you're not gonna survive to see a balanced court again. So if you're actually thinking that, you need to snap out of it right now because that is apocalyptic, suicidal political strategizing. It has already been thrown for literally decades to the Republicans. The idea that we would cement that for generations is insanity, and we need to push back against it. Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.